I could hear the birds, the wind, and the creek, but I could hear something else. Laughing. I've been an avid hiker for well over 10 years now, and an outdoorsy person for my whole life. Nature has always been a place that makes me feel free. My parents encouraged me to explore and get my hands and feet dirty outside when I was growing up. Me and my brother were always known as the barefoot kids that walked around our neighborhood and through the woods that surrounded it. As an adult, I still enjoy the feeling of walking through nature, albeit with shoes on now. I've hiked many trails and forests across many different national parks and other public lands, but to me, nothing could beat the forests at my home. I live in a town that borders the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest in North Georgia, a large landscape of forest located on the southern end of the Appalachian Mountains. I grew up with and still have this vast forest as my backyard. As such, whenever I'm feeling stressed or just needing some fresh air, I'll either take a short drive to one of the many hiking trails, walk on it for a bit, and then step into the woods and do some off-trail hiking, or simply walk to the edge of my backyard, hop a small fence, and begin exploring the section of forest that borders my neighborhood. I know people say that's a dumb and unsafe thing to do, and after everything that's happened, I see why now. But at the time, it was something I've done many times before my whole life. After a particularly long day at work, I decided a little outdoors adventure would do me some good. I changed into some hiking clothes, put some waters and granola bars in my backpack, placed a compass around my neck, walked to the edge of my backyard, and hopped the fence as I had done so many times before. I've read many scary stories about paranormal things happening in the woods. I know all the cliches of the bad vibes, the forest getting quiet, and the coppery smells. And most of all, the rules if you were in the Appalachians, and to be honest, it was always so dumb to me. I spent my whole life in these woods, and the scariest thing that has happened to me up to this point was having a deer jump out right in front of me because I had accidentally walked up on it while I was sleeping. This day was no different. The sun was out, the birds were singing, and I was already feeling better. And I wish I had turned back then. I made it about half a mile into the woods and was about to turn back. I was taking a breather and drinking one of the waters from my backpack as I rested beside a creek that sat between two small hills when I heard it. Being next to the creek, the noise was hard to make out, but just over the hill in front of me, I could hear a person talking. "What?" I muttered to myself. I looked over the maps of this area before. There shouldn't be a house or even a hiking trail for another mile. Immediately, there were two thoughts that entered my mind. Either this person is someone like me who just wants to be alone, or it was someone who was lost. I used some rocks to step over the creek and began moving up the rhododendron-covered hill slowly and quietly. I wanted to hear what the person was saying to know if they needed help. It wasn't long before I had two realizations as I got closer to the crest of the small hill. One, it wasn't a person, it was people. What sounded like a lot of people. And two, they weren't talking, they were laughing. As I inched closer to the top, now squatting low to the ground, the laughs were becoming more and more clear, but somehow that just made it stranger. The laughs sounded normal enough, but they were forced. Like when someone tells a joke and everyone in the group is laughing and you laugh along even though you don't understand the joke. It was normal people laughs, but it sounded breathy and devoid of genuine emotion. No words, no jokes, just constant laughing. I should have turned back then and there. I had no reason to look over that hill. Whatever was going on, it wasn't my business. I should have slinked back down, crossed the creek, and booked it back home. But something was calling to me. Something in my head was screaming at me to look over the hill. It wanted to know why they were laughing. It wanted to know what they were laughing at. It wanted to see what was so funny. And unfortunately, I listened and gave in to that part of me that told me to peek over the hill. And what I saw on the other side of the hill were probably 15 to 20 people. They were all dressed in normal hiking attire. Some looked a little dirtier than others, but otherwise they looked fine. They were laughing, spinning around, patting each other's backs, moving around in uncoordinated, almost dance-like movements. If you imagine what a weird group acid trip looks like, you probably aren't far off. I remember thinking how funny it looked, and the longer I looked at the people, the funnier it seemed. Looking back, this doesn't make any sense. It didn't look funny to me even then. It looked strange and unsettling. Looking at them left a pit in my stomach, but it was like my mind would only let me feel humored by it, like looking at them was some kind of drug. That's when it happened. A single breathy laugh escaped my mouth. Immediately, unnaturally, the crowd of people stopped laughing and rigidly turned to face me with wide, toothy smiles and emotionless eyes. I swear, some of them turned in a way that was so fast and awkward that it couldn't have been done by a human. Their facial expressions were unsettling, to say the least. They smiled, but in a way that looked like you would have to really force yourself to keep your lips stretched so wide. Their eyes looked filled with the same lack of emotion that was present in their strained laughs. Immediately, the humor-struck feeling left me and was replaced by fear that no person should ever experience. The creek behind me was silent now. It was like my fear had drowned out all of the noise around me. Then, they scattered. Some sprinted, others going on all fours, and crawled back into the dense brush. The noise was back now. I could hear the birds, the wind, and the creek, but I could hear something else. Laughing. I let out a scream and began to run. I sprinted down the hill, jumping clean over the creek, and kept running in the same direction I came. The laughing was everywhere. I could hear it to my right, I could hear it to my left and behind me. But when I looked around for who was laughing, all I saw were trees and bushes. As I ran by a bush at the top of the hill, I saw an arm shoot out with an ear-piercing laugh to follow. I ducked under it, but they grabbed my backpack and pulled it. Maybe I was just off balance, but the thing that grabbed my backpack felt like it had the sturdiness of a tree. My backpack was immediately ripped off me, and I was sent tumbling down the hill. The adrenaline was pumping at this point, and any pain would have to wait. The laughter was getting louder, or rather, getting closer. Once I stopped rolling, I sprung back up and kept running. I kept running for what felt like hours, using the same trails I had used to reach that wretched place. Even as the laughing became distant, I kept running. I knew they would catch me if I stopped, even for a moment. I ran until my chest and stomach slammed into the chain-link fence of my backyard. Once inside my house, I locked every door, closed every blind, and cried on the floor like a child. That was 2 weeks ago, and I haven't stepped foot in the forest since that day, and I don't plan to anytime soon. I always thought the forest was part of my home, that I could be comfortable there, but I know that isn't true now. All the joy, all the peace that nature once brought me is now replaced with this sinking feeling of dread every time I imagine being in the woods. The forest isn't my home. It's theirs, whatever they are, and they don't like that I trespass. I'm writing this now because earlier today, I heard a thud on my back door window. When I got up and went to investigate, I found a single granola bar sitting in front of the door. When I stopped and looked at the woods, I heard it. It was faint, but it was there. The sound that shook me to my very core. The sound of breathy laughter coming from deep in the woods. Thank you for staying until the end of the show. I appreciate you giving me some of your time, and I look forward to seeing you again. If you can tell me what you enjoyed about today's episode, that will help me so I know what things to give you more of. This story came from Reddit user u/BigBossGamer365, and for someone's first story, I think they did a pretty good job, don't you? But if you like stories where a person runs into others in the most unexpected places, Perhaps you'll enjoy listening to my last story about someone catching up with an old friend at work after not seeing them for over 4 years. And if you just want to listen to more of my voice, you can listen to all the episodes in the series here. I am on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, and all the other places you can find podcasts if you are interested in listening to this kind of stuff outside of YouTube. The link to the original post and my platforms will be in the description for you to check out at your convenience. We recently hit 10 subscribers on the Inviso Build Dark YouTube channel, and I'm grateful to every one of those shadows that lurk in the dark, and also to those that allow me to read their stories. And if you have a story you would like to recommend to me, you can reach out to me via Reddit, Discord, or email. Those mediums of communication will also be in the description for this episode. Again, if you enjoyed today's episode, tune in for the next story or just go back and watch the last one. But until then, I hope I gave you chills, excitement, or fright. Thank you for listening, and to all, a good night.